Hunting for Answers is a production of the Black Effect Podcast Network and iHeartRadio. Welcome to Hunting for Answers. I'm your host, Hunter, and today we're shifting the lens a bit. On this episode, we're talking about what healthy relationship dynamics actually look like and the warning signs that sometimes get mislabeled as love. To put that in perspective, according to the CDC, nearly 1 in 4 women and about 1 in 7 men in the United States have experienced severe physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. Intimate partner violence can also include stalking and psychological aggression, and it doesn't always start with physical violence. On this show, we often talk about what happens after tragedy, after someone goes missing, after violence, after loss. But many of those stories share early moments where something felt off, even if no one had a name for it yet. This episode is about those moments. Joining me is licensed clinical social worker Veronique Esther, who works directly with clients on relationship dynamics, boundaries, attachment, and communication. This is Hunting for Answers Before the Harm. First off, let's just set the frame. When people hear healthy relationships, what do you find they often picture and what usually gets left out of that definition?
When people talk about healthy relationships, they're usually talking about the things that that other people can visually see in them. Most of the time it's about like the aesthetics of a relationship and sometimes like how they want to feel. But very rarely is it about like the intangibles of a relationship, which is what a relationship is mostly based out of, right? So lived experience is literally just a string of conversations that hold your connection together, right? Because when you're in a romantic relationship or any relationship, like outside of family, none of it is tied to relation. None of it is tied to blood or anything like that. It's on the basis of agreements and conversations that have been made.
Not everyone enters a relationship looking for the same thing, and that matters.
I think everybody comes in with a different style or perspective on what a healthy relationship is. Some people aren't even really looking for a healthy relationship in the way that like we're discussing it now. They're looking for comfort or safety, or like these singular, really important things. They're looking for connection, love, somewhere to safely experience sex. You know, they're looking for these like specific things.
Veronique says healthy relationships aren't assumed. They're negotiated.
Every time somebody comes into a relationship, they're having to, or they should be negotiating what healthy means in their context and per their experience. I do think that there are tenets of healthy love and relationships, but how it looks and is lived out and the boundaries required and the needs that each person may have, that's going to differ. And that is what is going to ultimately mean that your relationship is healthy, because you can check off all of the things on a list that I give you, but let's say it's missing, a sense of just agreement and like the nuance that is required per person. That doesn't mean that you have a healthy relationship just because, it's generally nice and unproblematic.
In true crime stories, people often ask, how did this get so far?
As with most things, it starts with mindset. So if a person has unrealistic expectations, that kind of raises a flag for me. If they don't have boundaries, like people who just struggle with boundaries and having standards, that is where I see the most like opportunity for abuse or toxic behavior, exchanges, etc. It's evident kind of in the choices of their partner, choice in partner rather. I would say those are the main things that I would notice. Like, how do you view relationships? Do you see relationships as a means and avenue towards rescue? Or is it something that is input output and is really about the person and not just about how you want to feel all the time, while also being connected to your body. It's a lot of nuance, right? But like being connected to your body, being clear about your standards and values, and then always kind of discerning what you're seeing, but against those things, and being willing to communicate when those things are not in alignment. But when that communication channel is blocked, either by that person's own experiences, fears, doubts, roadblocks, barriers, or because their partner is not willing to listen and to contribute, what would lead to like a safer environment, a healthier environment in that relationship, that is kind of where we start to see those issues.
So why do unhealthy dynamics sometimes feel normal or even romantic at the beginning?
Yes, familiarity. So we get a lot of our cues according to attachment theory, which, has really found its way into pop psychology. But a lot of people get their cues on what relationships should feel like, should look like from their family of origins. But on average, like we're just living our lives and we just fall into whatever chemistry pull, or maybe there's we have these things in common, so all these commonalities, or maybe you're in a certain stage in life and you're just looking for companionship. Those are our driving forces and factors towards relationships. So we don't always do the work of assessing and discerning if this is in alignment with ultimately what I want. Sometimes it's just familiar. Sometimes you haven't had better examples. So of course you're going to accept, somebody who is maybe immature, emotionally distant, or that isn't communicative, because maybe what you saw in your family of origins or in your staple figures didn't do that either. So why would you expect different? It's hard for you to know that something else exists if you haven't been exposed to it.
According to a large 2015 U.S. national study titled Associations Between Adult Attachment Style and Mental Health Care Utilization, about 63% of adults reported a secure attachment style, while the remaining 36% fell into insecure patterns, including anxious, avoidant, and other styles, which research shows can influence how people handle closeness and conflict. One early warning sign shows up more often than people realize.
When you feel like you are censoring yourself, which is different than let me choose my words wisely, right? Being wise with your words is different than censorship. A lot of my clients that I've seen that kind of have these unhealthy dynamics, there's a lot of fear. If I am scared to talk to my partner about anything, I know that I'm not in the safest space. And it could be fear because like they're very defensive. It could be fear because they might gaslight me. It could be fear because they might be manipulative. It could be fear because they might dismiss me. All of those things are concerning and indicative of an unhealthy relationship. And that's like an early sign.
She calls out 3 early red flags: boundary violations, isolation from friends, and partner-induced secrecy.
When you feel like you have to be secretive, not just about what's happening in the relationship, but about your partner in general. Like if you know you're not telling your friends the full story of something, if you know that you cover for that partner a lot, and you're always trying to present them in a good light, or you downplay and don't really talk about that partner in general, especially to people that you know, love, and trust, that is a sign.
Relationship research shows that aggressive escalation patterns are a strong warning sign for relationship distress and breakdown. But it doesn't usually start big. It can start with things people laugh off as just joking or playing. What are some ways that aggression might commonly show up in more socially accepted ways, where people might just kind of like turn a blind eye or think, that might not be that serious?
So this one is a personal one to me, and I'm not going to present it as fact, but I do think that it's behavior to watch out for. I would say aggressive play. And what I mean by that is there are some couples who are just really playful. They play pranks on each other. Especially if you come from a family, especially Black families where, you be joning each other. And like, that's just part of your cultural environment. That's one thing, right? Especially when you're all in agreement. As long as nobody's the butt of the joke in a way like we're all laughing, cool. But aggressive play that is physical in nature or that is constantly trying to one up the joke and it starts to get serious and nobody's backing down, that I think it can be aggressive in a surprising way, right? People are like, oh, that's just how they are. Well, look at both of their faces. Are they still playing after a while? Or is this getting up into, like I said, a level of aggression? I don't have a problem with couples arguing. I think that argument is just a natural part of life, because you're going to disagree. You're just going to disagree. I do think that I prefer disagreement over argument, because argument is like just about being right. And so the posturing of like you're trying to get your point across. But all arguing is not inherently bad, especially if you have a good recovery plan and especially if we're not weaponizing anything or using things against the other person. But when that does enter the picture where we're going for hurt, we're going for, trying to get that thing in that that you're probably going to regret saying, that is when I'm concerned. And then when there's a level of escalation. So yelling in relationships, there's really no reason for anybody to yell. Raising your voice, maybe, because if that's just, your tone kind of thing. But I would say like, if you're in a point where you can no longer be mindful of your tone, it's already going too far.
What are some common myths around love, loyalty, or ride or die? We heard that phrase a lot. These mentalities that can keep people in harmful situations.
I don't necessarily believe that loyalty is a necessary value. I think we assume that loyalty is the same as faithfulness, and it's not, right? Loyalty is by any cost, and I think faithfulness is just a virtue, like to be faithful to something, to see it through to the end, to acknowledge the commitment that you have made. But I think loyalty socially has put us in a mindset of like, no matter what, right? Like you said, ride or die, I'm down for this situation. And I think loyalty puts people in trouble, especially people of color. We already are at a disadvantage when it comes to our perceptions and experiences in love. And I think that when you prioritize loyalty over well-being, that is a problem.
Earlier, we had touched on what happens when someone can start to feel isolated or disconnected from friends and family. So when that happens, how does someone slowly go from feeling connected to their support system to feeling more isolated in their relationship if they don't, see it? It's a gradual type of process.
I would ask, is your partner the main reason why you're not connected to them? And that sounds so well, duh. But I think it can become so gradual that you gotta look back and be like, wait, what? Is your partner the main reason? Can you point back to a moment or a thing that your partner said or did that caused you to drift away from those relationships? And then the other thing would be, have you drifted away from those relationships because if those people in your life knew what your relationship was like, they would have something to say? So that's that secrecy element that I was talking about before. So I think sometimes we don't realize how we start to kind of drift away because we know what we're in is kind of a hot mess, but we don't want to acknowledge it and we don't want anybody else to acknowledge and see it. So we start to drift away. And then the last thing kind of related to the first thing is, how much does your partner insert themselves into your relationship? Are they always do they encourage you to hang out with your friends, to call your friends, to see your friends? Or, do you cancel a lot because of how they feel, what they're thinking, what they've said? Oh, I don't think you should hang out. Oh, you would let somebody, if that person has too much opinion and input regarding your relationships, regarding your family, etc., they're overstepping.
Going deeper into more warning signs and red flags, why does it become harder for people to recognize these things once they have become emotionally invested?
Number one, that familiarity that I mentioned before. Again, it's hard to notice notice that something is off when that level of off is what you're used to and what you've seen other women and people in your life endure. And then the other thing is love can be intoxicating, especially when you're with somebody that's very charismatic. And let's not forget, like, toxic relationships don't always feel toxic. It's a roller coaster. That's actually what keeps you on, right? Because once you've gotten to the highest heights and you go down, you're trying to get back up there. It can be very addictive. And we just do that in general, especially when we have like addictive patterns and behaviors. We're seeking that high, that thing again, that emotional connection again. And so just because you're at the low, you're hoping, you know how high the roller coaster can get, and you don't want to get off before it gets high again, because maybe this time it'll stay high. But what we forget too is that a healthy relationship, I had a client earlier today, and one of the things they said was love is ordinary. And we're always looking, and I was like, yes, 100%, because we're always looking for the extraordinary, but real healthy, consistent love, it's ordinary.
How can someone tell the difference between a relationship challenge and a genuine warning sign?
It's in how you deal with it. So first of all, cheating is not a relationship challenge. Let's just start there, right? Getting physically violent, not a relationship challenge. So those things that are like inherently harmful, those aren't challenges, those are problems. Those are things that you really need to take a good hard look at. But it really lies in like, how do we deal with it? Am I heard when I have a problem or when I have an issue to raise? Do we have times where we check in? Are we both tapped into the heartbeat of the relationship? And so when issues arise, it's not me versus you, it's us trying to figure it out together. Is there a collaborative environment when a challenge arises?
Say I'm your client and I'm like, I don't know how to communicate with my partner, and they are coming into discourse every time, they try to talk something out. What are the top 2 or 3 things that you do recommend to couples who are having communication problems?
So according to Gottman, somewhere around 70% of recurring arguments are unsolvable. My alternative to them has been, well, accept that. And then point 2, plan around your deficits. So, okay, your partner is never going to wash the dishes. You want them to wash the dishes. They are like, I try, but I'm just so busy. I'm tired, Great. All right, we're not going to get past this argument. Let's plan around it. You have to be willing to have those conversations, be honest about it, and then tell them what you need. And then the other part is really teaching people to be vulnerable. That the biggest communication issue is that people don't want to be vulnerable. They don't want to say what they're really saying.
I feel like boundaries are those things where it's easier said than done. And so we'll say that we, hold ourselves accountable to certain boundaries, but then sometimes that might not always be the case. So what are some tips that people can do to set healthy boundaries early on in their relationships? And what does it look like when their partner respects that?
Yeah. So I love boundaries. I like to say that boundaries are my favorite B word. I have like a whole workshop called Build Better Boundaries Bootcamp. And the number one thing is, especially before you're in a committed relationship, but just so you know, it is never too late to assert a boundary. Ever, 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 ever. I don't care if you've been letting people step on your toes 9 times a day. The next day, the day that you decide that you don't want them stepping on your toes anymore, you need to remove your foot. You can't just say, well, I've always let them, and now you're done. Your boundaries have to be rooted in your standards. And we often interchange those words, but they're not really the same. But we are so used to borrowing boundaries from people and talking about our boundaries that we forget that we have to live it out and the stakes that are required. Asserting boundaries, especially in close relationships, is a bit emotionally jarring, because at our core, we want to please people. We want to be part of the pack. We don't want to separate ourselves, and boundaries does that. Especially when there has to be a consequence, or not necessarily a consequence, but the outcome of that boundary not being honored.
What would you say to those who feel guilty for putting up boundaries or wanting more space?
They didn't feel guilty when they were taking advantage of your lack of boundaries.
Yikes.
So, you said yikes. No, I mean, that's my petty answer. Especially for people who like give people over and over, like especially people in situationships. But for my clients that struggle with that, that's how you get there. You get into a situationship because you have a lack of boundaries. The people that benefit from you having a lack of boundaries, they're the ones that are going to be the most mad when you start to implement boundaries.
For friends or loved ones watching, they see someone close to them going through something and it looks off. What are safer or more supportive ways to intervene or check in on them without pushing them away or having them get more defensive?
So number one, you can't control anybody's response to how you hold them accountable. It's better for you to ask the questions than to keep them comfortable.
If people could walk away from this episode with just one mindset shift about relationships, what should it be?
Remember that just because a person is a good person doesn't mean that they're good for you. Really think about, like, am I choosing and is my list and desires based on what I want other people to see or what is in my best, like, holistic good?
Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you think is really important for listeners to know?
Learn to love for the sake of loving and not as a means to something else. When love becomes about, filling voids or making you feel better about your past or exclusively, like, we can find healing in love and love and relationships can give us corrective emotional experiences. But when we're not willing to do or haven't done some of that work for ourselves first and we're using relationships as a way to fix things, that is when, like, we're not really positioning ourselves for healthy love. We're positioning ourselves instead for codependency, which is what most people have. They don't have love and healthy love. And so learning to see the beauty and necessity in relationships without thinking that you have to have them by any means necessary.
If this conversation gave you something to stop and think about, follow Hunting for Answers. You can also connect with us through our Facebook group and find us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Reach out to us if there's a story or case you believe deserves attention. Thank you for joining us for another episode. Until next time. Hunting for Answers is a production of the Black Effect Podcast Network. For more podcasts from the Black Effect Podcast Network, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.